Well, as you guys come in for Sunday school, there's handouts on the back. Last week you were privileged to get 8 pages. This week you've got 15. It's a lot, and again, I'll give us a minute while more people come in. Hey, Leon, as you come in, can you flip the remainder of the lights on overhead right in here? As you come in, can you flip on the remainder of the overhead lights right here? I'm talking to you, Leon. As you walk in, can you turn on the remainder of the overhead lights for me? Thank you. Oh, that's better. I can see you now. All right. As you come in, there's handouts that you can pick up. Today, as we look into this extremely long passage with a lot of stuff going on. I hope you had an opportunity to read up this week, just to glance through it, so that you could be completely overwhelmed with what we were going to be looking at today. One of the things that you will find as we go through this is you're going to feel from time to time like John is repeating himself. Like we opened up last week with these 7 seals, and each time a seal was broken, something happened on earth, right? This week, as a trumpet is blown, something is happening on earth. And next week, there's going to be something else that's happening while things are happening on earth. Now, here's one of the things I want you to really capture about John. Because if you don't, what you can find yourself doing is, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. There's a comedian that I heard talking one time that he got a book. He got the book of the Bible. He handed to him. He had never read it before, and so it was only a New Testament. And so he opened it up to Matthew, and he said, you do what you do with the Bible. With any book, you read it from the beginning to the end, right? And so he opens up Matthew, and he's like, oh wow, Jesus is born. He's killed. He's buried. He raised from the dead, and then he goes up into heaven. And then he flips over to Mark, and he goes, he's born again, he's killed again, he's buried again, he's resurrected again, and he's ascended again. Then he goes to John. He's born. So one of the things you got to realize about John is he's going to tell a story. When he gets to the end of the story, he's going to pick it up, rotate it, and look at it from another perspective. And so last week we were on these 7 seals, all right? And all of these things, the 4 horsemen are unleashed on the earth. What we're going to see now is at the same time, for every seal that's open, a trumpet is blown. And every time a trumpet is blown, you're going to hear a retelling of something that we've already read. And this is going to happen throughout the book of Revelation. Because it's John and he's using so much numbers, how many times do you think this story is repeated? 3 times. Why 3? I highlighted the numbers again on the very top of your first page. 3 is divine. So this story of war, this story of overcoming, this story of overtaking is a divine overcoming. And we can't forget that as we go through this. And so I started here, as we get into this story, as is told from the trumpeter's standpoint, right? There's a book that I turned to this week to start helping because this is such a big segment. And it's a book that if you were a person who wanted to go deeper in reading about the book of Revelation, this is actually a book I would recommend. There's not many that I would recommend. And it's a book written by a man by the name of N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright spent the first 30 years of his professional life studying and writing about first century Judaism, about the life and times of Jesus and Paul. So his entire focus from the very beginning has been on understanding the first century world and what that would have meant through Jesus' life and ministry, death and resurrection, what it would have meant through Paul's life transformation, going from someone who was martyring other people to someone who is martyred. And he has written about all of that, and he's written a bunch of books about all of that. Well, on 9/11, he was confronted with what does it mean to come to the end? And it transformed him. But it transformed him from a place of understanding first century culture. So when he opened up the book of Revelation and began to read it from his informed, educated perspective, he began to process, how can I tell other people about this? Because what he is doing is he reads Revelation and he asks the question, what did this mean for the very first people who ever read this letter? Now, understanding what it meant for them, what can that mean for us today? Okay, and this is the way that I love to read Scripture. And so the book that he wrote is called Revelation for Everyone. And there is, about halfway down the very first page, there's a footnote that has the title and the author, if it's something that you want. I've got it. I bought it on Amazon Kindle. I bought it for my Kindle this week, and I've been on there. And so there's a couple of passages. There's this top half of the page actually comes from N.T. Wright. And then if you flip over to the very back, the back side of this, and you follow it around to the inside of the booklet from there, where it starts with the 10 plagues of Egypt were as followed, that's another excerpt from his book, and it's footnoted there on the back. But those are just a few samples that would help you to understand how he writes, if that's something that would trigger your desire to read and to go a little bit deeper with this stuff than what I'm able to give you in 23 short sessions of 40 minutes or shorter. Okay? All right. So what I want to set up for you is the message that N.T. Wright says John wants to get across in this story of the war. And so I'm not going to read it because for me to read this would detract from the story. So I've got it in my head. And he tells this story. He says, you're laying in bed one night and you hear a storm starting to kick up. And so you get up to shut the windows. And as you get about halfway to the windows, the electricity goes out. And so you stumble through the house to get to that junk drawer that holds the batteries and the flashlights. And in his era, he stumbles to find the candle and the match. And as he gets to the drawer, he reaches in and he grabs a candle. And as he's reaching, he realizes that he's got wind hitting him in his face, but he's standing close to his back door. Oh no, the back door is open. And so he reaches and he grabs the candle and he grabs the match and he lights it and the wind blows it out, but not before he can see just outside the door this figure. It's a dog, maybe. And then he begins to hear this deep growl. And he reaches again and grabs another match and he lights it and he lights the candle, but this time he wished he hadn't. Because what's standing in front of him is not just a dog, but it is this four-legged creature with large teeth and this mane that comes around. He's got a long spiny tail, and it's things that nightmares are made of. And he reaches to slam the door, but it's too late. And that's the story that John is trying to give us, that angst, that something's coming that we can't adequately describe. And so let me give you the best, quickest picture I could possibly give you. And so this is the place where when you get to this part of Scripture, N.T. Wright makes this statement in his book. He goes, for those of you who really love to read books, one of the most difficult books to comprehend is the Bible. For those who love to read the Bible, the most difficult book within the Bible to read is Revelation. And of those of you who love to read Revelation, this is the most difficult section of the entire book. And if you want to get to the most difficult section within that, go into chapter 11. It's going to be the hardest to read. And so just saying that notates that we're in a very difficult thing. And so what I want to try to do is to give you the best snapshot, quick overview that I can possibly give you, understanding how long this thing is and understanding how complex it is and how scary it can be. And so at the top of this page, Bob and Shirley, did you guys get one of these pages as you came in on the back? Okay. At the top and highlighted was, remember last week we talked an awful lot about numerology. We talked about how John really holds true to what numbers represented in the Jewish culture. And so I highlighted some of these. Now, some of the things that you're going to come across is things that have been skewed one way or another over time. And maybe as you hear the numbers, you'll be like, oh, wow, that's very interesting. So things like, 2 is about opposition or division. 3 is about divinity. 4 is about earthly or humanity. 7 is the combination of 3 and 4, and it's where the divine comes to meet the earth. 10 is about completion or wholeness or entirety. 365 and a quarter is our current year, but that's not the years that were represented in the early Roman culture. In the early Roman culture, there were 360 days in a year, and then there were 4.5 days at the end of the year in which the gods slept. And in that last few days, you could do whatever you wanted to, and you would bear no burden, no regret, because the gods couldn't see it to hold it against you, and therefore the law slept during that time frame. So if you've ever wondered why lambing season, if we're looking at the birth story of Jesus, and the shepherds were out with the lambs because it was lambing season, which is typically in March, not in December, why did the Christians celebrate the birth of Christ in December, at the very end of December, in the last 6 days of the year? Instead of when it actually happened. They celebrated then because the Roman government slept. And when they would normally be persecuted and possibly crucified and killed for their faith and their walk with Jesus Christ, in that last week of the year, they were free to celebrate openly without fear of persecution. And so today, that has been transferred to December 25th, is when we celebrate the birth of Jesus. Was he born on December 25th? No. No lambs were dropping at that point in time. And he was born as the perfect lamb for us. So he would have been born in March. Okay? But that's why we celebrate that now in December. Okay. So, there is no way we're going to get to read all of this. That's why you have this nice little printout. Did you guys grab a printout off the back table when you came in? Awesome. All right. And so what we're going to look at is the very bottom of the first page was the last segment that we read last week. Okay? And I mentioned earlier that John tells a story, he gets to the end of it, he twists it, and he retells it from another perspective. Imagine that at 8:4, at the end of that 7th seal being opened, John stops. He goes, all right, now let me tell you what's going on one by one as those seals were broken. So we're getting a different picture now, right? So, on to page 2. First trumpet is the top. All right, so vegetation is struck. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and the third of the trees were burned up, and all the grass was burned up. The second trumpet, and the angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from the heavens, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and of the springs of waters, and the name of the star was Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. Fourth trumpet. Then the fourth trumpet sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And it looked, and I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to all the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet and of the three angels who were about to sound. Now, I want to stop right there. As I named off what's going on, did the things that were happening remind you of any other time of writing in the Bible? Bless you. The plagues of the Old Testament. So in the first four, which happen in rapid fire succession, just like the first four seals that are opened in rapid fire succession, and you get the four horsemen of the apocalypse, here you have the first one, the third one, and the fourth one are piece for piece identical to things that are going on in Egypt during the 10 plagues. Now, you've got fire falling from heaven, you've got hail, you've got water turning to blood. Now, here's something that I want us to be crystal clear when we read this. Is God doing this because he is a God of vengeance? And the answer is no. Why did God send the 10 plagues on Egypt to begin with? To turn their hearts. Why did God send Jonah to Nineveh to begin with? To turn their hearts. This story has been told over and over and over again. Remember in the story of Jonah, if you're like me, I love them in the VeggieTales segment of this. You know, that they were fish slappers. That's what their sin was. They slapped people with fishes. And Jonah wants to go. Jonah doesn't want to go. In fact, he gets swallowed up by a whale because he's running away from God's plan. And this whale ends up in this great storm. He says, throw me overseas because I'm the one who's disobeying God. The whale swallows him up, takes him across the Mediterranean Sea, and spits him out on the shoreline as close as you can possibly get to Nineveh. Jonah hates Ninevites. Israelites hated Ninevites because they worshiped false gods. All right? So he doesn't want to give the message God gives him because he's certain the Ninevites will kill him. But he wants them to suffer the plagues that God says they will do. But here's the problem in Jonah's story. The Ninevites listened. And so God did nothing. Fast forward. Rewind. Go back in time. Go back to the Egyptians. God sends Moses. Moses stands before Pharaoh and says, guys, if you don't stop it, this is fixing to happen. There's blood in the water. And in Revelation, it's no longer just the river Nile. It's a third of all the water in the world. Now, do we think that is a literal 1/3? No, because it's a third. It's 3. So there's going to be something behind that. It is going to be whatever it takes for people to begin to believe. It's that divine transformation. There's fire falling from heaven. The 1, 3, and 4 are directly out of the plagues. Number 2 is an interesting one that's not out of the plagues, but is directly out of Jesus. For if you have faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. And the mountain is thrown into the sea. So we've got a lot that's going on here, and this is saying that the world is being turned upside down, but it's not being turned upside down to beat it up. Yes?
This is going to open up a whole weird thing, but there is some speculation that the plagues of Egypt were sparked by a volcanic eruption in the Mediterranean Sea.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was any understanding of that at that time, that would certainly look like a great mountain burning with fire being thrown into the sea as well.
Yeah.
Just in
Nope.
thinking about what their Jewish understanding may have been at that point in time, had they, I'm sure eventually word of the volcanic eruption would have reached, Egypt and the Jews, no matter where they were, and understanding their their own history, they may have recognized that as being part of those plagues as well.
Right. Did everyone hear what she said? And do you have any understanding? Have you ever seen there's what is considered to be the picturesque of Greek pictures, and it's a city called Santorini. And Santorini is a picture that's built on almost a vertical slope, and it is all blue roofs and white walls and blue doors. And it is beautiful. But Santorini used to be a volcano, and it erupted around 1500 BC, about the same time that the Egyptians would have been leaving in the plagues, and with such a violent eruption that the entire mountain disintegrated and got burst all over the Mediterranean Sea. And Santorini is like the only livable spot that's left out of that. And so that's what Amy is talking about. There are some theologians that believe that that is actually what caused the swarm of locusts, that caused all of these events. The earthquake would have been violent enough that it would have caused the Nile to stand still. It would have caused the Red Sea to potentially divide. There's a lot of speculation. There's actually, I don't know how many people actually read a whole lot about the geography, history of the United States, but there was a violent enough earthquake in the 1800s that the Mississippi backed up for 3 days. The Mississippi River. Now, we see how big that is, but it flowed backwards, and that happened in Missouri. It happened there at, not San Andreas Fault, that's out in New Madrid, Missouri, New Madrid Faults. So anyway, so that you're very right. That can be part of the Jewish understanding. I don't know what the Jews knew about that, but that is a part of it, of everything that can be going on there. And so when we talk about that, we have to understand Jesus, God in the Old Testament, was not giving those plagues to torment the Egyptians. He was trying to turn their hearts. But you see throughout the progression of each of these different plagues, even in the Old Testament, that if it doesn't turn their hearts, it does what to them? It hardens them, so that their death is desired at that point in time. So by the time it all got down to it, and we had the death of the firstborn, the Passover, as the 10th plague in Egypt, at that point in time, what does Pharaoh say? Get them out of here. I want them gone. Okay? And so that's kind of what we see going on. These are things that are so cataclysmic in nature that everyone on earth has got to know that it is God. All right. So now we flip to the 5th. And I saw a star fall from the heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And as he opened the bottomless pit, the smoke arose, and out of the pit, like the smoke of a great furnace, some of the sun and air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke locusts came up on the earth, and to them was given great power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. They were commanded not to harm the grass or the earth or eat anything green or any tree, but only men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it, and they will desire to die, and death will flee from them. All right, and then this next part goes on to describe these locusts. Flashback to the story I gave you at the very beginning. All right? This ultimate terror that's coming, and we can't describe it. Now, modern dispensationalist predestination literature would equate these locusts to an Apache helicopter. All right? Maybe it is. All right? But here's the thing. When you see something that is supposed to eat up your grass, and it grows large enough that it starts to eat up man, and something that you should be able to stomp on, but now it's wearing helmets and metal armor. And it's devouring all that is evil. And it's coming out of this pit. Now, here's a part of this too. No scholar actually believes that John is describing a physical pit that he walked up to and saw. All right? But that it has a representation, and here's the representation. Do we all have a pit of despair within us? Do we have this thing that is so far deep down inside of us that we can't quite find it? But out of that pit can come the most horrid experiences of our lives. Out of that pit, you could be capable of doing things that you would never imagine in your right mind. Out of that pit comes brokenness and sorrow and hurt and anguish and pain to the point that you wish to die. That is what John is describing. Now, there are people to whom they no longer battle the pit of despair. If you're in this room today and you are battling a darkness within you, a pit of despair that is within you, what John is saying throughout this is, thank God you're in the battle. Because it is when you stop battling that you have given over to the darkness that can come from within. Who torments us from within? It is Satan. And so when we talk about this, he gives this great long story, and it's on their heads are crowns like gold, and their faces were like the face of men, and they had long women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. And I'm not sure why it's important that they had long women's hair, but they did. And they had the breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wing was like the sound of chariots with many horses into the battle, and their tails were like scorpions and with stingers on their tails. Their power was to hurt men for 5 months. Could they kill the men? No. They weren't allowed to kill them. They were only allowed to torment them until the men desired death. But then death would not come. Why would death not come? Why would Jesus not allow death to come in the midst of that place? Because Jesus is still hope. Jesus is allowing people to be tormented by whatever is within them, whatever is around them. But the hope, the goal, the ultimate desire for Jesus is for them to turn to him so he can remove the torment. So I want you to remember that as you go through tough times in your life. Is Jesus wanting to hurt you? No, he's wanting you. And he is allowing things to happen in your life in hopes that it will drive you closer to him. Then the sixth trumpet sounded. Back to this, the very end of this. And they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is the same name, Apollyon. And those each mean torture. Each of those names have a literal meaning of torture. So it is tribulation is another word for that. Tribulation meaning to distress or suffer resulting from oppression or persecution, a trying experience. So then we get the sixth trumpet. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying that the sixth angel who had the trumpet released the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now, this is another situation where that doesn't mean anything to us. I put two scriptures there and I highlighted them. The reason I highlighted them is these are scriptures that talk about the Euphrates River. They're talking about the Euphrates River as the northern border of God's people. At this day and age, at this point in time, all of Jerusalem, all of Israel is being oppressed, and it's coming from the northern border. Who do you think sits at the northern border? Rome. Rome is at the northern border. This is written within 10 years after Rome destroys the temple and the Holy of Holies. Who do you think every reader is going to think about when they think about who is battling at the northern border? Everyone is talking about Rome. And this goes on. Now, I love this. In the New King James Version, which I chose to put out here, it says that there was a number of the army of the horsemen who were 200 million. Now, that 200 million is not listed in numerology. Even in the Greek culture, you would never say 200 million. What is actually said there is twice 10,000 10,000s. So 10,000 times 10,000 is 10 million, and then twice that is 20 million. That's where they're getting that. Except for you miss what John is saying if you just say 20 million people are out there. There is twice, which means there is a divide. There's a difference. And there are 10,000 10,000s. 10 is perfection. 10 is completeness, wholeness. And 1,000 is more than you can count. But what he is saying is there battling on the front are all of those who have proven that they want to fight for what is good and right and God. And that's what's out there. And there is a division that's happening there at the front lines. And we are not all. One other possible meaning of the twice is we don't all have the same gifts of how we battle this. There are differences in us. You know, Brian, you may be standing up there with a sword. And Amy's going to be standing back there right behind you with a gurney. You know, I mean, just to say, I mean, we all have different gifts and we all have different ways that we are battling in this. Yeah. Well, you're going to help whoever falls, and you know, I mean, not that it's necessarily Brian, but Brian might have a big sword and you might not, and we're all going to have these different gifts, and we're all going to be divided on how that looks for us individually. But we're battling the demons. All right, but the rest of mankind, the highlighted section on the next page, but the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons or idols of gold or silver or brass or stone or wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immoralities or their thefts. This is the part where John is saying it was all to bring about repentance. It was all to bring about transformation of heart. God is not doing this just to be a wicked guy. He's doing this because he wants us. And he's willing to allow these things to happen in the lives of this world so that we can find him, because he is constantly seeking us. Yes, please.
What's interesting about that word sorceries that's used there,
Mm-hmm.
the word that's used is pharmakeia,
Pharmacy.
right? And when you read that, and especially because I worked at it, I understand that it really is a pull that's over them. And they really have to determine, I'm not going to let this be my God anymore. And so when I think of that, there's going to be a lot who
Yeah.
are going to be willing to give up the things that control them.
Yeah.
And drugs is one of those things. I fully believe that.
Yeah. That's the thing in all of this. You've got to be willing to let go of whatever God you're holding on to. Whatever lie, whatever belief, whatever fear, whatever hope, whatever thing you've got to be willing to let that go to embrace God. And you can't. Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. And then we've got this mighty angel with a little book, and This is a weird story, a very weird story, where this little book is brought to John, and John's not allowed to tell what's inside the book. It is written as if it is a different book than the book that is unsealed, except for it mirrors a previous story in which John is allowed to see a book and not allowed to write about what he saw in that sealed book. And so we've got this book, and then he does the unthinkable. He's told to eat the book. Eat it. And it says that it was sweet as honey to taste, but the moment he finished it, it turned his stomach sour. It turned to bitterness. Now, as weird as this whole thing sounds, I highlighted Ezekiel 2:8 through 3:3. Because guess what happens there? Ezekiel is told to eat a book, and it does the same thing to him. And this is the prophecies against the people of Judah. And they are told if they don't change, if they don't turn, these things are going to happen. And that's the amazing thing about prophecy. When you see prophecy throughout Scripture, there's these really weird things that happen. But the point is always about, guys, if you don't change, there are consequences for your action. And the consequences are self-inflicted. Once you know what the consequence is it the other person's problem or fault that you end up where you're at? Once you're told of what the consequences are, it's your fault. It's your fault always. And this is all about John telling us what the consequences are if we don't leave behind the broken life of this world and focus on the perfect life of his kingdom. So we've got, all right. So then we have another weird story. Surprise, surprise. 11 kicks off another weird story. There's these two witnesses, and they are down on earth with measuring sticks, measuring the place where the temple is going to come down. And then they end up being tormented and killed and left out in the streets for people to see their death. And then one day they just get up and walk away. Now here's the amazing thing again. All right, I told you numerology plays a part on this. So we get this here, and we see that as they were tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. 42 months is 3.5 years. Okay? 3.5 movements. Now what is 3.5? It's half of 7. So God is trying to meet us halfway. And when he can't get us at meeting us halfway, he begins to move again. So they were there, and I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy. In case you missed the 3.5 years in months time frame, they're going to witness for 1,260 days. Guess how long that is? 3.5 years. And then you're going to, verse 4. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire proceeds from their mouth and devours their enemy. And anyone who wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. These have the power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. And they have the power over water to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all the plagues as often as they desire. Where are we again? We're back in Egypt again. We're back in Egypt. Why are the prophets doing this? Why are these 2 men? Because there are 2 men in Egypt. There is Moses, and Moses said, "Here am I, Lord, send Aaron." Moses and Aaron are back there. Now there's a lot of speculation about who these people might be. We don't really know who they are. But here's the funny thing. In Ezekiel 40 and in Zechariah 20, you both have these things that are coming out of earth, these men who are coming, and they are measuring the world. Now, here's the greatest thing to take away from this. In in Old Testament, a measuring for the temple, especially in Zechariah and Ezekiel, comes with an idea. In Zechariah, he's coming after the first temple has been torn down. And he's measuring for where God is going to place his second temple, where the new people are. In 70 AD, the temple was torn down to never be rebuilt. What do the Christians in first century believe the temple is? It's us. So these two guys aren't down here necessarily measuring in cubits. They're measuring Amy's and Karen's and Leslie's and Brian's. They're measuring Regina's and Leon's and Kenny's, and they're measuring the people, the temples of our God. And they're laying out, and you'll see later where there's another battle that's coming. And who's battling? But the temples. Now, it doesn't say that's not what he calls them again, but what he's calling them is the people of God. And when you've got these two witnesses that are out there, this is a reminder of how these people are redeemed. They're redeemed because someone was willing to go to the grave for them. And they walked out. And so these two witnesses are all about finding the people of God. And so you have the 3.5 years, and then all of a sudden they lay out in the street for 3.5 days. So this death is about getting us closer. It's another half of 7. It's getting us closer. God is coming closer to us with each and every step. If you're not able to go 50%, can you come 25%? Can you come 12.5%? God is doing everything to reach us. And that's really and truly the point of what we have to figure out in this process. This is not described to break us away and to mess us up. This is described to help us understand that he wants closer to us. So, all right. So then you come to the end of this at the 7th trumpet, and then I'm going to go straight to 19, and it says, the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen on his earth, and there was lightnings and noises and thunderings and earthquakes and great hails, and we talked about that last week. This has happened before. This happened at the end of the 7 seals, thunderings and lightnings and voices and echoes, and so closed scene. For this next part, he's going to pick up the story. He's going to turn it again. And we're going to see it from another angle. In case you missed it these first 2 times that I've talked about this, we're going to come at it one more time. And so I'm going to go super quick with one of the hardest parts. The woman, the child, and the dragon is what comes up next. So there's this woman, and she's pregnant. And she comes down, and there's a dragon that climbs out of the sea. And then there's this second beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns that answers to the dragon. And then there's this third being that's the beast of what is he, the air? Sorry. Oh, there's the dragon, then there's the beast of the sea, then there's the beast of the earth. Okay. So you've got the story that starts with a retelling of Ezekiel of Satan being cast out of heaven. All right? That's where this starts. So automatically we know that we're going to begin to talk about evil. We're going to talk about the evil that is happening here and around us and through us. And so you have this telling in Isaiah 14:12 and this again in Ezekiel 28:16 that talks about Satan being thrown out of heaven. And so then you have this dragon that is now chasing these kids, this woman and her child, this pregnant woman. Now, this woman is... let's see, I'm on the beginning of 12. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with sun and with the moon under her feet, and her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain and gave birth. Now, there's a couple of major understandings of who this could be. They do not believe this is a physical description of the Virgin Mary. Instead, they believe it is either a description of the creation of humankind, and this is Eve, Or to get more clearly and more closely to the Israelites, Israel is considered to be the bride of Christ. So they believe that this is who it is. And she is pregnant and she gives birth to a child who cannot be killed by the serpent. She herself cannot be killed by this dragon. And there's actually kind of a proclamation within here that will be echoed in our sermon today. She bore a male child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And that is a direct translation of Psalm 2:9. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. We're back to the 1260, 3.5. All right, so in this, the woman can be persecuted if you look down at the bottom of the page, but the earth in the highlighted section, the earth helped the woman. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war against the rest of her offsprings who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of who? Jesus Christ. All right. The reason for Eve as an explanation for this is because of the Genesis chapter 2 proclamation that the serpent will strike at the heel of the woman, and the woman will stomp at the head of the serpent. The dragon is the serpent, but the dragon is represented in this as Rome, okay? Rome is who we're talking about. Rome is knocking at the door. Rome is who is chasing them and beating them up and killing them. And the beast of the sea who is doing the evil deeds of Rome is the emperor himself. We know that because at the end of this, he has a number, and his number is 666. And so we know Nero, that is highly known within Hebrew culture, that is who we're talking about. Now, does that mean it's not someone for us today? No, because of the description of the beast. The description of the beast actually comes out of Daniel 4, and Daniel 4 is describing 4 countries with 4 kings with all of these things that are going on. And he translates and gives one creature all characteristics of those 4. And he says we're no longer dealing with a world in which there are 4 major cultures that are dictating the world, but we're dealing with one, and that one is Rome. And the one who carries it out is the emperor, and the one who listens to the emperor is the local government. And so that's where we continue to go. Guys, I am sorry we did not make it any deeper. There is a ton of stuff here. Continue to read. If you want to go deeper yourself, the book that I listed that's on the very back page here, N.T. Wright, Revelation for Everyone, has a great opportunity for you to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Thank you. I'm sweating. So, love you guys. Thanks for engaging.